We've lived with this situation for a long time. We need a closure with it, either one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
A man cannot go on and keep living like this.
This is understandable. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
It's been extremely stressful on him over that period of time. I've known him for years, and I know when he's under stress and when he's catching fish like I like.
Hanover County Sheriff's Office investigated a complaint of alleged bank fraud. The suspect, Faye Creedy, was sentenced to 10 months 10 months incarceration and 5 years of probation for bank fraud after the incident became known to the federal judges. However, there were a lot of issues as how the investigation was conducted. And I'm here with Mr. Neil Creedy to talk to him about his complaint against the Hanover County Sheriff's Office. Now, you told me the investigator Scott Woody had issues that basically was not satisfactory to the investigation. What happened?
Well, Hanover Sheriff's Department sent Mr. Woody to my house to start an investigation and to gather the evidence and the information of the crimes committed. And I had Mr. Morgan Gassman with me at the time for a witness. Mr. Woody came to my home in 2008. I told him and showed him evidence, and the evidence I showed him was about credit card fraud with Chase Manhattan Bank. It was about bank fraud and forgery or altering a signature card with SunTrust Bank. It was about bad checks written to SunTrust Mortgage. It was about bank fraud with the Bank of Louisa on an equity line of credit, and bad checks written to that bank as well as bad checks written to the Division of Motor Vehicles, multiple convenience stores, gas stations. There was also a refund check of $3,500 that my lawyer and myself were given a duplicate copy of that $3,500 check, which I deposited, and it was agreed that we would split that check down the middle. Before it cleared, I wrote her a check for half of that amount.
So were you a victim of all the financial fraud that was involved?
Yes.
And how much money total were you defrauded?
The fraud totals probably in a neighborhood of $45,000 to $50,000.
Who do you think is the primary suspect in this fraud?
The primary suspect is my estranged wife, Faye Woodson Reidelbach Creedy.
Were you guys together, married at the time?
Yes.
What elements can you claim that would connect her to being a fraud, even though she was your wife?
I have documentation, I have pictures, and I have information of her involvement in a prostitution ring in the Richmond, Henrico, Hanover area.
Is it a place of business, or is it something?
Yes, it's a place of
business. What
business.
Is it called?
It's Ava's Boutique on West Broad.
PoliceBees.com was here a couple months ago. Was it July or August?
July.
And now it's October. And this was the business that we were questioning about people paying for sexual favors here. And now we see that it's closed down. Let's briefly go into what the complaint was about the business here.
My estranged wife worked for this woman at this location as a prostitute in the 90s. To my knowledge, there was some kind of a bust done, and I have directly linked her to Ava through court records in Henrico County, where she tried to commit some credit card fraud with Ava's credit card. There's another victim directly involved with the marriage, and that would be her 95-year-old aunt, Bessie Askew. Bessie is deceased now, but she died broke and with a broken heart. She defrauded Miss Askew, or her aunt, out of $250,000. That was also supposedly investigated in Hanover County. My witnesses would be Mr. Morgan Gassman. I think Mr. Kamau has already spoke with him, Mr. David Tatum, who was a lifelong friend of mine and a former deputy sheriff.
Okay. And these are witnesses to what part of the...
They're witnesses to, well, Mr. Gassman witnessed the interview with Mr. Scott Woody, Investigator Scott Woody of the Hanover Sheriff's Department.
Okay. And then
He was there for the entire thing.
Do you know Scott Woody, who's an investigator?
Yes, he's with Hanover County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. And can you elaborate what role did he play in this overall situation?
Well, Mr. Crichton was not satisfied with the attention that he was not getting, and he went to the Hanover County Sheriff Department to request similar action.
Okay.
And Mr. Woody came out to his residence on Woodson Mill Road and spoke with him there. I was present during the interview. I was present during both of the interviews, heard both sides of the conversation, and I felt at that time, the same as I did the first time, that there would be some action taken, or there'd be at least an inquiry into the facts that were germane to the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what was the result of that inquiry?
I would not know. I've never seen him or spoken to him since, either one of them. I've seen no further action on the part of any investigative agency or person.
Did you witness any parts of the criminal activity?
Okay, Mr. Tatum
Uh-huh.
was with me when I went to the Commonwealth Attorney in Hanover about bank fraud. He told us that bank fraud was a civil matter, and I agreed it was civil because we were married, but it's also criminal. And he refused to see it as a criminal matter. This is an
A SunTrust affidavit, or
identity theft affidavit.
okay, who wrote that one?
I did.
Okay.
This is for,
and that's for the financial fraud
Identity
there.
Theft Assistance Center, which haven't got any assistance yet. Rappahannock Electric. This is a bill from Rappahannock Electric. This is an ID theft affidavit, I think, for the Federal Trade Commission. Fraudulent account statement about Chase Manhattan Bank, which she was convicted of that. This is in Hanover County Sheriff's Department Deputy Dave Kliz and Matt Rashford.
You said you had dealings with the other investigators at the Hanover Sheriff's Department?
Yes. Mr. Investigator Rashford called me and told me he had talked to Chase Manhattan Bank, or the credit card bank, about the fraud, and he told me that it was a civil matter.
Okay.
That bank fraud was a civil matter.
And what about the other two investigators?
David Kliz was informed of her attempt to have me murdered.
Okay, so there was a plot to have you murdered?
Yes. This is a sworn statement that I gave to the conspiracy to commit murder. Took place in Louisa County.
Okay.
This is a sworn statement from myself. This is a sworn statement from Morgan Gassman.
Okay. And what did he tell you about that? What was his claim?
He really didn't tell me anything other than to watch myself. He offered me no help whatsoever, no protection. He confronted her and her attorney at the courtroom and warned her about that. And then later, after I spoke with the state police about that matter, the state police told me that they were informed by Hanover that they had referred me to the Louisa County Sheriff's Department a year prior. When I got that information, I went to and filed a complaint with the Louisa County Sheriff's Department. I had two witnesses that were approached about murder for hire. Both witnesses gave sworn statements to the Louisa County Sheriff's Department, and that would be Investigator Richard Baker.
I want to direct your attention to an investigator by the name of Baker.
Yes.
Have you encountered? Do you know this person that we're talking
I
about?
have met him. I've watched him interview Mr. Crichton in Louisa, Virginia.
Okay. Do you feel that Baker wanted to do a proper investigation for him, or?
I got the impression that when Mr. Baker spoke with us, that he was sincere, that he had an interest in the investigation and that he was going to take positive action.
Okay, and then what happened?
Nothing.
Nothing. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Baker took the statements. Mr. Baker spoke with me. Mr. Baker had her in for questioning, and he informed me that he was going to take the case to the Louisa County Prosecutor for prosecution, but told me he could not make me any promises that the case would be accepted, and the Louisa County Prosecutor considered it hearsay evidence and did not think he could win the case, so he refused.
So
to
they at
prosecute.
least considered it, but then...
Yes, it was.
Didn't feel like there was
There are
strong-
sworn statements taken. There was in interviews by Mr. Baker, and I was told that Mr. Baker had retired, but I'm now finding out that he is not retired. But I have spoke with Investigator Stanton with that Sheriff's Department in Louisa, and he told me he was my contact information from here out, and he told me he would help me any way he could. I went to the Virginia State Police Department headquarters. I spoke with Investigator Worley, and I went through all of the information and the whole story of what's happened, and he took notes, and that meeting lasted probably an hour. And when it was over, he told me he was going to go talk to his supervisor, and he came back in the room and told me that they did not want to get involved. After I'd been denied by Hanover and been denied by the state police, I took the case to the evidence to the United States Postal Investigation Service, being that one of the crimes was postal fraud.
Okay.
And I think he was compelled to investigate, and I have the utmost respect and gratitude for Postal Investigator O'Donnell. He is the only man in law enforcement that I have met to date that knew his job and was willing to do his job. Some of the case was unfolded in the courtroom in a show cause hearing for the divorce in on the civil side of the case, where I was trying to get a divorce. I hired an attorney, Mr. Edward Barnes, with Barnes & Deal law firm in Chesterfield County, and Mr. Barnes took me for $15,000, and he played nothing but games with her attorney, and the court. He scheduled a show cause hearing, and at that hearing, the Honorable Judge Alderman asked the question point blank to the criminal about mortgage payments that she had failed to make under a pendente lite or separation agreement that Mr. Barnes had drafted, and it was signed and entered into the court. And her response was that she had made those payments on August the 29th. That check came back. It was written on a froze or blocked account. So she used that check as evidence in the courtroom of mortgage payments.
Okay, so in result, there was no relief that you gained from...
None whatsoever.
Now, it did go before... Now, the U.S. Postal Inspector took the case to Federal Judge Roberts Payne, and that was actually a federal criminal case against Fay. What happened in that?
There was a plea bargain done, and I was excluded from the plea bargain process. I'd hired a second attorney because I had fired Mr. Barnes. I hired another attorney.
So ultimately, she ended up being sentenced 10 months incarceration and 5 years probation for bank fraud. Was there any order of restitution made?
None whatsoever.
And you're asking that they mortify their lack of professional investigation, and you're seeking restitution
Exactly.
for the money that you lost. Okay, well, I think we have enough right here. I appreciate talking with you, and this will be an ongoing investigation. Thank you very much.
This is an informational video that we're putting together here in Yorktown, Virginia. My name is Neil Creedy. I am a United States Coast Guard veteran. I'm also a victim of financial fraud. In the jurisdiction of Hanover County, I did get a federal investigation and a federal prosecution because the prosecution was denied by the Hanover State Prosecutor. There was more crimes committed in the jurisdiction of Louisa County. I had a meeting this past Friday with the investigator Mark Stanton, Louisa County Sheriff's Department, concerning the conspiracy to commit murder, my murder, in Louisa County during the commission of the 3 felony crimes that were prosecuted by the federal government. A federal judge in the case is actually my best witness, and his comments and remarks are documented on the federal court report, where he says doesn't know what's going on up in Hanover County, but he does know it's no way to run a railroad. He said Mr. Creedy has been mightily wrong in this case. It's an erroneous matter and a terrible situation he is left in. The federal conviction only got the money back for the bank because the identity theft and the postal charge were dropped for a plea bargain, which took me out of the equation for restitution. That did officially make me a victim of federal financial fraud, entitling me to the rights outlined under the Crime Victims Bill of Rights, which also reaches into the state of Virginia. The state has its own laws on crime victims' rights. Those rights are also being ignored and denied by a Coast Guard veteran who served to get due process of the law and equal justice for all, like it says in our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So that is what this video is about. We are going to leave here and go up the hill to my so-called congressman's office and continue this video. We're up the hill here from where we just left, down by the waterfront, where the surrender actually took place and our country was born. We're now at the location of my so-called congressman, Rob Whitman. I have been to this office and to the prior location over the course of the past 3 or 4 years as a victim of federal financial fraud and as a United States Coast Guard veteran, seeking Mr. Whitman's support and assistance as a victim of crime and as a veteran. I have some issues with the Office for Victims of Crime, which is just obviously another failed government agency. But I have no congressman or anybody to support me. My first visit to this office, I was referred to my state senator Thomas Norman in Williamsburg. As a veteran, I've been dishonored by my own so-called congressman. The latest I hear about Mr. Whitman, he will not meet me. I need to bring this to the public's attention. Any civil rights attorneys or public officials who know the difference between due process and public corruption are strongly encouraged to contact me, and my email address will be attached to this video. It's a beautiful day here, and I am only asking for my life, liberty, and property that has been stolen from me in Hanover County, Virginia, the home of Patrick Henry, who made that claim to a corrupt British government quite some time ago. He was also the first governor of the state of Virginia, and I understand Mr. Whitman wants that position as well. So I encourage Rob Whitman, Tommy Norman, anybody in law enforcement that knows crime when they see it, to contact me in this matter. As a victim of crime, I'm entitled to what's known as a writ of mandamus, and I have to file a writ of mandamus on a host of people involved. I am doing this because I have to have due process and equal justice, which is something I served to defend for all of us with my service to the country and state in the United States Coast Guard.